What's going on, everybody? I'm Tom Scavetta here with James Montefusco, and we are going to recap the 2022 New York Mets season, mainly focusing on their playoff series against the San Diego Padres. But, folks, before we get into that, make sure you go check us out on all of our social media platforms at Review and Preview Sports. You can follow us on Instagram, Twitter, Facebook, and YouTube at Review and Preview Sports. Ring the bell for notifications if you like what you see here on our channel. James, first off, how are you and how are you feeling, dare I ask?
I'm good. How am I feeling? Let's just say I'm feeling a lot better with that Giants win yesterday. Take some of the pain away from the Mets loss yesterday. So it's kind of counterbalancing it. But I digress. What about you, Tom?
Same thing for me. Let's talk about that Mets loss yesterday. 6-0 loss to the Padres. The New York Mets are eliminated from the playoffs in the wild card round. The Mets made history, James. They were the first 100-plus win team to not make the divisional series. Quite frankly, I don't know what your opinion is on this Mets team as a whole following this series, but I'll say this. I'm embarrassed. This team is pathetic. They continue to buy and not build. I think you know this. I called this from a mile away. We played a clip last week back from June. It was June 8th. I predicted the Braves would win the NL East, and it happened.
Mm-hmm.
And it happened, and people didn't take this seriously. That the Braves were winning a lot of games late in the season. People gave all the credit to Atlanta, but clearly the Mets deserved some of the blame as well. Not just Atlanta winning. Pete Alonso said it. We got swept by the Cubs at home. He lost the series to the Nationals. It would have never gotten to the point where the Mets had to win that final series against the Atlanta Braves, or at least win one game for them if they took care of business beforehand. There's no excuse. There is no excuse as to why the Mets should have lost this series at home to the San Diego Padres. There's no excuse as to why the Mets should have lost the NL East to the Atlanta Braves, who have now won the division for, I think, the last 5 straight years. They continue to dominate. And James, I guess the one word I'll use to describe this Mets season is disappointing.
Yeah, I think disappointing is the correct word for it. Tom, me and you both know that the Mets usually give the fans a heartbreak early on into the season. And I think either I was texting you along the side or in one of the chats that the Mets are waiting to the end of the season to do that heartbreak. And, well, that Atlanta Braves was start of that heartbreak. And September was also because on a September where we should have easily gone way above, I think we went 500 to go that 500 mark, get swept by Atlanta, having to play the Padres in the wild card round. They were just some of us all got sucked into this is our year to then seeing September and was like, oh no, they're actually going to break our hearts later in the year than they normally do. And that's what we saw.
All I kept hearing all year long was this team is different. This team is different. And, you know, people are entitled to their own opinion about this, but I feel like a lot of Mets fans were just way too optimistic on this team. Now, granted, they had injuries, and I get it. You know, they were without deGrom for most of the year. Scherzer missed time. Marte missed time. Nimmo missed the beginning of the season. But there's no excuse to only get one hit in last night's game. There's no excuse as to why Chris Bassitt couldn't go past 4 innings in each of his last 2 starts, by the way.
Mm-hmm.
He gave up 3 runs in just 4 innings last night. His sinker just wasn't there. Buck Showalter, in my opinion, he should be up to potentially be manager of the year. I think that's a fair argument. However, what he did last night to check on Joe Musgrove's right ear when you're down 4-0, Buck, what are you doing? That is embarrassing. That is a desperation move. It shouldn't have happened.
No.
I thought that was, and again, I'm with Joe Musgrove there. I'm sorry. If Mets fans get mad at me for it, so be it. I'm not going to defend Buck Showalter here. He's not the reason why the Mets lost the series and were put in this position. But at that point, he's desperate, and literally your team just couldn't hit. That's the wake-up call, Buck, that you had to get, unfortunately. Your team was not good in this series. They weren't good the last month of the season. And now we're sitting here eliminated from the playoffs as expected. And I think I was on Hank's show a few months back, and there was a question asked, who would have a better chance of beating the Dodgers in the playoffs, the Mets or the Braves? I came out and said, I don't even think the Mets will get to the Dodgers in the playoffs, mainly because I didn't expect them to be in the Dodgers bracket. I thought the Mets would lose in the NLDS.
Mm-hmm.
Well, I was wrong. I thought the Mets were going to be a wild card, win, get to the NLDS, and it didn't happen that way. Or actually, no. Hold on. Basically, what I meant to say was that I didn't think the Mets were going to get past whoever they were playing in the NLDS. Ultimately, I think the Dodgers and the Braves were going to be the 1 and the 2.
Mm-hmm.
So in that regard, the Mets would have played the Dodgers in the NLDS. So no, I take that back, actually. With the new playoff format, it confuses me a little bit. So apologies about that, folks. But yeah, they weren't going to get past the wild card round, in my opinion, with the way the format was set up. Because if you lose the division to the Braves, James, you're automatically in the Dodgers bracket. But I mean, before we get to this other baloney, I mean, what do you think of this Musgrove thing late in the game? I thought it was ridiculous.
You know, part of me says it made sense because his ears, everybody was calling for, was shiny until the broadcasters said some players put, what is it, like icy hot, it seems like, on their ears to get their adrenaline keep going and whatnot. I mean, I think it was a way for the Mets to throw off the pitcher, but when somebody gets called out like that at a national stage and just pitching the way he was pitching, to then have the umps come up and check, and you saw that whole team are like, are you serious?
Mm-hmm.
You know, like right now, it's not like inning 1, inning 2, where it's like, wait, what? This is a little funky. Like, hold on. You're looking at, what was it, 4th or the 5th inning, where you're already pretty much halfway through the game. You know, it's like, it would make sense if Buck did this in the 2nd inning, not all of a sudden coming out of commercial break and we're like, oh, time to check the pitchers. Like, wait, what? Why?
Yeah, it's not a good look. But I mean, overall, I thought Buck was part of the reason why the team won 101 games. Very well managed season. I thought the Edwin Diaz trumpet crap was ridiculous. You're down 4-0. There's no need for that.
Why would you even play that? You're down. It's not like you're tied 4-4 or 4-3.
Yeah. Here's the bottom line. The Padres made the moves at the deadline they had to get to this point. The Mets did not. The Mets went out. They got Daniel Vogelbach. They got Tyler Naquin. And they got Darren Ruff, which, quite frankly, none of those worked out. You could argue Vogelbach to an extent, but he was real hit or miss. Not a Michael Givens guy out of that bullpen. Just the Mets didn't do enough. They tried calling up Brett Beatty. He got hurt, unfortunately. And Francisco Alvarez, you bring him up for the biggest series of the season. Once they brought up Francisco Alvarez, I knew the Mets were losing the division for sure.
Didn't make any sense.
110%. It did not make any sense at all. It's like, yeah, you don't trust who you have in your lineup, so you're desperate and calling this kid up who's never played an MLB game before on the biggest stage. And you got guys like Juan Soto who were cracking RBIs every game of the series. He had another 2 last night. Yep. Their catcher was good, Austin Nola. He had a pair of ribbies. And what about Gary Cohen's comments towards the Buck situation? I thought they were spot on. I know there was a group of Mets fans standing behind them that were booing. I don't know why. He was 100% right. That Buck shouldn't have did that. The Mets put themselves in this position, and now us
Mm-hmm.
Mets fans have to live with this for the entire offseason. And
Yep.
every ounce of trolling that's headed the Mets' way right now, in my opinion, most of it's justified. Most of it is justified.
Oh yeah. I
There's
mean, I
no other way.
agree.
It sucks. I don't like it one bit. I don't.
No.
But I mean, come on. Think with your head, Mets fans. Think with your head. It's not too hard. It's like talking to a wall.
Sometimes it is. And to have the Mets do what they did all season long was win games, suck us in and then lose it the last time. I mean, Tom, you said this earlier, we'll address this shortly, is you have your ace and deGrom out for I would say 90% of the season. Scherzer missed a decent amount of time, and the Mets were still able to win games. But then
So there's no excuse.
there's no excuse, and then you put these two guys up. deGrom won his game. Scherzer gets hammered.
Mm-hmm.
So,
yeah,
you also have to look at it like this team is built to win
right.
now.
Yep.
That means today, not next year.
Yep.
But also their stupid celebrations. I unfortunately, Tom, have to agree with Barry Seinfeld. My opinion on him. I don't find it very fun. Just putting that out there. But for him to say, why would you celebrate the Diaz's trumpet thing in the middle? What was it, in September? You didn't win anything. You didn't win anything.
I don't find it funny at all. In fact, I don't think it's necessary. I think it's an epic entrance. Don't get me wrong, but you're not out here to, market yourself. Like it's like
No.
a way, like he's trying to prove that he's this great pitcher, which he is. Don't get me wrong, but
Oh yeah.
There were so many distractions in this series. And I thought Brandon Nimmo said it best. He said, nobody cared that we won 101 games, just that we lost these last two.
Yeah.
As in these last 2 of 3. Game 1, you mentioned, Scherzer got shelled. He gave up 4 homers to Josh Bell, another trade deadline acquisition by the Padres, Manny Machado, Jurickson Profar, and then Trent Grisham. The Padres won that game 7-1. Now, I want to talk about game 2 because you were there.
Yes.
You were there at game 2. Jacob deGrom was on the mound. What did you see? What did you like from Jake in that start? And just what was the postseason environment like, to put a little light into this video here?
So I've never been to a postseason game in baseball. I've been to hockey, not football, and not baseball until this last Saturday. I would say it was a different environment. Actually, I'll start even from the very beginning of the time I was there. Was I tried to get to the main Citi Field lot, and it was full. So they said, "Oh, just park in this other lot." $50 later. Glad the Mets won because I would have been pissed. Was I parked in like this where the 7 line is, so that was pretty cool. Like, all right, you walk over, sat in like the 500 section. It was a great atmosphere. It was loud. It was everything like I would expect, that we see on TV. deGrom, he didn't. Not a little disappointed. I guess a little disappointed is the correct words to use. deGrom didn't look like himself a little bit. He wasn't throwing those. Yeah, he was throwing hard. He was dueling, but he wasn't, as we see all the time, or most of the time, him just striking out batters, sitting people down, doing these 1, 2, 3 innings. It was it was a slow, drawn out game. Well, I think that game was like 4 hours long. The atmosphere is great. The people around us, it's always great to have fans that are so passionate for a team, no matter where you're sitting in the stadium. It was just great to be there. And then when deGrom walked off, I think in the 5th, I said to myself,
6th inning was his last inning.
Yeah, so the 6th inning was his last inning. When he walked off in the 5th, I wasn't sure if he was coming back for the 6th. I just watched him walk off. I said to myself, this might be probably the last time he walks off this mound or this field. Obviously, he had another inning to go, but I got that feeling in the 5th that this might be the last time deGrom's in blue and orange. That it's just unfortunate that he wasn't dueling like his normal self, but he was still playing at an extremely high level. But I was like, this is not where I would like to be at, because even during that game, that team looked like it was out of gas at certain points. Like it was like 11 o'clock and the whole stadium was also running out of gas. It's like, we've been here 4 hours. It's chilly. It's cold. Like, can we, let's land and go home. But even like, I just got a feeling within that stadium towards the end of the night, and especially during some of the plays, during some of the innings, the team just looked at like it was out of gas, and a lot of the players besides those playmakers looked like the only ones that had some gas left in that tank.
It's a long season.
It is a long season. You win 101 games, you think you're in the playoffs, you're going to get that rush. But there was a few players that had that rush. And then, Tom, I think we saw it a lot last night. That team just looked like it was out of gas. Like that Atlanta Braves series really sucked the life out of them.
It did.
But overall, I enjoyed the W. I enjoyed them winning. I was I would say I'm 2-1 this past season at Citi Field. So
nice.
But it's just unfortunate that I probably said that one of the last games the Browns going to be pitching at Citi Field for a Met.
Right.
In a Mets uniform.
Yeah. I mean, look, there was a lot of good in that game that happened. Nimmo had 3 hits. McNeil had a pair of RBIs. Also, shout out Jeff McNeil for winning the batting title this year. Well deserved. Yes, very well deserved. I know you've kind of been, hinting around this topic, but let's address the elephant in the room. deGrom, 8 strikeouts over 6 innings in game 2. Was that his final start as a Met? Will the Mets find a way to re-sign him? Will Steve Cohen dish out the money and say, here it is, Jake, take it, and we'll get you a ring? Or does he move on and look for another opportunity? Because the Mets now, this is the position that they're in. If the Wilpons were still running the show, deGrom would be 100% out. But now that Steve Cohen's running the show, there's still a chance that they could bring him back. At this point, it's on Jake. The Mets have the money to keep him. But will they, James?
They will offer him probably the best deal they want to offer him. That's no questions asked. I think it's whether does deGrom want to come back. deGrom, I think, has been with this team, for 10 years?
Yeah, 2014.
All right,
I think was when,
So about 8-9 years.
He made his debut. I think he was drafted in 2012, I want to say.
Okay. So he's been with this organization for pretty much his whole career. We'll say that. Yep. For Steve Cohen to offer him, say, X amount of dollars, like a lot of money, right? It's ultimately up to deGrom. deGrom could either be like, yes, I'll come back for the money and play for you for, say, another 5 years and possibly not get a ring. Or does he go to say, these are 2 teams that I've thought about, especially this one team. The Dodgers, for example, which, you see a lot of the players go to the Dodgers. Or I was thinking, everybody's talking about at the stadium, we can get Judge. We could get Judge. I could see this happening. We get Judge. Yankees get deGrom. deGrom wins a ring with the Yankees. As bad and sickening as that sounds.
I don't see it.
But I would love deGrom to come back, but I think deGrom's going to play that free agency and really see what's out there because he knows his worth. We all know what he's worth when he's healthy. It's just, what does he want to come back to the Mets?
Right.
And have another, say, 100-win season, but goes nowhere again? Or does he go somewhere else that gets a 80 to 90-win season and makes it to the World Series?
Yeah, if I was him, I'd move on and sign with another team. I think he deserves better at this point, but the Mets fan in me wants him to stay, of course. I think we all do. We know how special of a talent he is. 2-time Cy Young Award winner, NL Rookie of the Year, 4-time All-Star. I mean, the guy is brilliant. He's the best pitcher in the league still, in my opinion.
Yes.
And with the way Jake was handling it in the post-game presser, they asked him, like, contract year, and he just said, like, I don't want to discuss this right now. I'm just focused on the game that we just lost, unfortunately. Like, I'm just focused on the now. He's not focused on the future. So I think it's going to come down to a wait and see type of thing with him. I think this situation might get milked out a little bit, but ultimately, I do think that if deGrom stays, it will likely be no more than a 3-year. There's no way deGrom is giving the next 5 years to the Mets. I mean, you could pay him as much as you want. You could give him a Scherzer-like deal, which, again, Scherzer's contract is awful. The Braves just re-signed Spencer Strider today, 6 years, and that doesn't even touch what Scherzer's making over 2. That's besides the point. Anyway, as bad as this sounds, you have to pay the man if you want to keep him. If the Mets are smart, they'll move on from deGrom, and they'll start to blow this thing up and rebuild. Will the Mets do that? I don't know. Ultimately, it's up to Jake, and I think it's time to move on. I think it's time for Jacob deGrom to move on from the Mets, in my opinion.
I think so.
I respect whatever decision deGrom makes. And that's another thing, too, we haven't addressed yet. What about Nimmo? Nimmo's a free agent, too. Like, do you bring him back? I mean, I don't know. Like, fans were screaming, re-sign Nimmo last night at the game. I saw an article somewhere about that because, this is a serious issue, James. We could be without deGrom and Nimmo next year. And now you're like, Diaz too, right? Yeah.
Yeah. I think he's a free agent too.
That's right. Yep. It's like, where are you going to allocate your resources to?
I mean, there's a bigger list than those 3 guys, but those are 3 big fan favorites, and Nimmo's been with this team, I think, for his whole career as well.
If I was in the Mets shoes, I would probably not force any of them to come back. I mean, I think if there's one likely to come back, it'll be Jake because they'll prioritize Jake.
Yeah.
Even over Diaz, I think. Then again, Diaz is younger, so he has the age factor in his way. Nimmo, that would be a tough blow. Leadoff hitter, leader, guy who gets on base, draws a lot of walks. He always leads the NL in walks pretty much every single year. He's among the league leaders in that category. But at the end of the day, I don't view this Mets season as a success. I was happy with a lot that happened during the season. 101 wins is remarkable, but unfortunately, it's going to get overshadowed by the last month of the season and what happened in these playoffs. The season was not a failure,
no,
in my opinion, but it was not a success either. It was a disappointment. It was a typical Mets season, except the uptick in wins this year, which I think had a lot to do with the addition of Buck Showalter as the manager of this team. The Mets won a lot of games this year that they would have lost last year. So overall, I'm happy with the amount of wins we got in the regular season. Unfortunately, it couldn't translate into playoff success. I was happy that we made it back to the playoffs, but I think it'll be an uphill battle for this team to win a championship anytime soon. James, any final thoughts?
No, other than this should be a very interesting second round of the playoffs on both sides of the American and NL side.
Yeah.
I just hope the Mets just make correct moves. And honestly, I know we're probably one of the wealthiest teams in the league, but as long we gotta be smart about it. We can't be signing these guys like a Scherzer deal for X amount of money.
I think Cohen, he's more of a businessman than a baseball mind. That's the problem.
It is a problem. But you know what? I'm cool with 101 wins. Pretty amazing to see. Not so cool about the way the season ended, especially the last month 3 days we saw this past weekend. Because if this was a normal wild card, last thing I'll say, a normal wild card before they changed it to a series, we would have been out by Friday.
Yeah.
Friday night,
Yep.
that would have been it.
Mm-hmm.
So
I agree 100%. This actually worked out in our favor, to be honest with you.
Yeah.
100%. Because we would have played San Diego regardless.
Oh, yeah.
It wouldn't have mattered. But until next season, folks, let's go Mets.